My name is Rebecca Scott, and I'm 32 years old. I never thought a family gathering could feel like a battlefield, but that morning, my world tilted sideways. I had spent most of my life keeping quiet, smoothing over chaos, and making myself small so others could shine. My older brother, Luke, had always been the star, charming, impulsive, effortlessly getting attention from our parents. I was the background, the one who fixed the mistakes no one noticed until they became urgent. Holidays in our house were a performance. Perfect stockings, matching pajamas if mom could afford them, lights strung just so, the scent of cinnamon masking tension. Mom called it making memories, which translated roughly to pretend we're perfect, even if we're barely surviving. I learned early to help behind the scenes, wrapping gifts with precise corners, fixing burnt gravy, labeling boxes in the garage like a meticulous archivist. Luke entered rooms last minute, delivering jokes that made everyone laugh. It was never cruelty, just charm. And I watched, hands empty, knowing that every laugh cost me unnoticed labor. That Christmas morning, I woke to the low hum of the TV fireplace loop and Mom humming along. I stepped into the living room. The scene was textbook Harper Family Christmas. Presents stacked like a catalog display, lights twinkling, everyone pretending joy. I looked for my name on a tag. Nothing. "Is there a gift for me?" I asked, careful not to let my voice waver. Mom didn't look up from the ribbon she was tying. "We don't buy things for ungrateful people," she said, as if quoting a calendar aphorism. Luke laughed. "Santa skipped you on purpose." I nodded, cheeks warming, and left the room. Outside, the cold stung my nose. I stood there until my chest stopped tightening. I understood the script. I had known it so long I could recite it blindfolded. Mom's judgment, Luke's jokes, my own quiet retreat. The next day, a knock at my apartment door broke the silence. Luke stood there, hoodie damp, eyes red. He didn't say hello. "I need $80,000 to save my business," he said matter-of-factly, like it was the morning weather. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because something clicked. Right to Santa, I thought. My family had a pattern. I had been the fixer, the quiet provider, the adult shadow behind the scenes. Act 1. Luke tries something big. Mom says, "Dream big, baby." Dad says, "Be practical." I say nothing because my line is always, "I can help." Act 2. It goes wrong. Money tight. Bills arrive with red letters. Mom says, "We'll figure it out." Dad says, "We already figured it out 10 times. I help quietly, almost invisibly, moving small amounts of savings, skipping my own comforts, working weekends, pretend everything's fine. Act 3. Luke's big move collapses. I clean up the pieces, once again invisible, and every year it's the same story. When Luke was 21, a used BMW with a laughable warranty, I co-signed. Missed payments? My money saved the car from repossession. When he opened a juice bar, I funded it quietly. Websites, accounts, late fees. I handled it all while remaining the background actor in my own life. It was never one huge act. It was 1,000 small ones, each with my name on the receipt. "You're good with money," Mom would say. In our house, that meant you were good at handing it over. Christmases measured in ledgers. One year Luke got a console. I got a clearance sweater with a security tag. Another year, my laptop was temporarily lent for college. 2 years later, I was still running essays at the library. Dad wasn't a villain. He was tired. He picked up double shifts, came home sagging, and shrugged at my sacrifices. "Let them have this," he'd whisper, pressing a $20 bill into my hand like a covert mission. By last year, I had learned to recognize the tremors. Mom would start with, "Your brother is under a lot of pressure." Dad would reread bills, recalculating the cost of appearances. Luke would talk louder, dream bigger, act like every pitch, every venture was his shot at greatness. One day in November, Luke texted, "Coffee?" He picked a cafe where the chairs wobbled and the coffee tasted like burnt almonds. Sitting across from him, he grinned. "I'm close," he said. "To what?" I asked. "Making it," he said, casual. Then, almost in passing, "The runway is tight." "How tight?" I asked. 80. He trailed off. I filled in the number. 1,000. Bridge funding. Short term. But in my mind, the memories of the last dozen short-term loans flashed. Cosigns, late fees, canceled payments, years of invisible labor. My own budget, small and meticulous, flashed on the mental screen. Rent, utilities, ramen, and a few dollars tucked into savings twice a month. No, I said. He blinked, shocked. What? No, I won't do it, and I said, not this time. He flinched. Mom says you'll cave. There it was, cave. The word hung between us like a verdict. I let the silence settle, as calm and sharp as broken glass. The snow outside pressed against the window pane. The coffee cooled. And in that moment, I felt something unfamiliar, not anger, not fear, but clarity. I would no longer be the background actor in Luke's life. Not today, not ever again. The days after Christmas felt like walking through a fog. Luke's words echoed, I need $80,000. I had been anticipating this exact pattern for years, yet the clarity of it now hit differently. I remembered every time I had saved him, the small, quiet rescues that no one noticed but me. At 21, he bought a used BMW with a laughable warranty. I co-signed, and when he missed payments, I covered them quietly. At 24, a juice bar, doomed by the winter months and mismanagement. Again, I filled the gaps. Website design, domain renewals, minor bills. I managed them all, my own savings silently siphoned. Every temporary loan became permanent, and every minor emergency was my responsibility. My parents didn't see me as a person. I was a safety net. Mom praised generosity. Dad assumed it silently. Luke expected it. And I, for years, allowed it because family is love, or so I told myself. But now, sitting at my small kitchen table, sipping lukewarm coffee, I realized how much of myself I had spent making everyone else's life easier. The endless stream of favors, the hidden payments, the late-night rides to his urgent meetings. They were invisible acts of devotion that bought me nothing but exhaustion and resentment. Luke leaned forward in the cafe, eyes bright with mischief and desperation. I'm serious, Rebecca. I need this. It's life or death for the business. I could see the pattern in his smile. It had been the same for years, the charm that wrapped obligation in laughter, the casual confidence that I would step in. But this time, I had prepared. My mind went over my budget. Rent, utilities, grocery bills, the few dollars I tucked away each month. There was no way. I couldn't allow myself to vanish under his weight again. Luke, I said softly, I don't have $80,000. I can't give it to you. He waved his hand, trying to dismiss my refusal. You have equity, adult things. You're good at adult stuff. Mom says you'll help. Mom says a lot of things, I countered, calm but firm. My hands didn't shake. I am not a bank. I'm not a rescue service. He blinked, disbelief flashing across his face. You're being cruel. I'm being clear, I said. I've been enabling this for years, and I won't anymore. The cafe felt smaller. The wobble of the chairs, the bitter coffee, even the hum of conversation seemed to shrink around our table. Luke's eyes darted, searching for the leverage he always found. Memories surfaced. The 12 late-night calls, the 36 unauthorized charges, the temporary loans that became permanent. Every moment he needed me, I was there. Every moment I needed him, invisible. You chose this, he said finally, voice tinged with mockery and hurt. No, I did what I was taught, I said. I was taught to be invisible, to fix what breaks, but I am done. He sat back, a shadow of confusion crossing his face. Mom will be furious. She already is, I said, and I won't buy my way into being her perfect child anymore. Luke's breath hitched. So, nothing? Nothing at all? Yes, I said. No money, no lies, no cosigns, no emergency bailouts, nothing. He laughed, a jagged sound. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said, but I'll regret staying in the background more. That night, at my apartment, I made small changes. I changed passwords, updated security on every account, removed his access, and felt a thrill at reclaiming the space that had always belonged to him. My apartment was small, thrifted, lived in, and it was finally mine. I cooked a simple dinner, made tea, and sat with the silence, letting it fill the spaces Luke and my parents had occupied in my mind for years. Mom called 8 times before noon the next day. I let it ring. Each call was a tidal wave. Worry, accusation, expectation. I ignored them all. My father sent a single text, brief and resigned. Call your mother. I didn't. For the first time, I realized that freedom wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It wasn't even satisfying in a traditional sense. It was quiet, steady, a reclaiming of life, one small act at a time. The coffee cooled on my table. I ate standing up, washed the pan immediately, and sat with the routine I had built. Work, run, cook, sleep. It was mundane, yes, but mine. And as I sat there, I thought of all the small sacrifices that had bound me for years. I had been a silent partner in everyone else's story, invisible yet indispensable. But now I began writing my own chapter, and it started with a single word: no. The first small victories were practical. No more overnight rides, no more payments for someone else's failure, no more answering texts that demanded emotional labor I didn't owe. Every ignored call, every canceled obligation, every evening spent in my own company built a wall around me, not a prison, but a protection. By the end of that week, Luke had stopped texting. Mom sent shorter messages, more neutral. Dad said nothing more than necessary. And I realized, in a quiet, almost shocking way, that I had survived the family storm. I had always survived. I just hadn't been living for myself. That was about to change. It happened quietly, almost imperceptibly, before it became a storm. My apartment felt too small, too controlled, as if the walls themselves were waiting for an eruption. And then Luke appeared, like a shadow I hadn't invited but couldn't ignore. "Rebecca," he said, stepping inside without knocking, "we need to talk. This is serious." I didn't rise, I didn't flinch. "Sit," I said. The word held authority I hadn't used in years. He perched on the edge of my couch, hoodie damp, eyes darting. I miscalculated. Contracts got delayed, investors ghosted. "I need your help. Mom says you'll understand." "Mom says a lot of things," I said, voice steady. "But I'm not a bank. I'm not your safety net anymore." His shoulders slumped just slightly, but enough to reveal the tension he usually hid behind charm. "So, nothing?" "Yes, nothing," I replied. I could feel my own heartbeat, not out of fear, but clarity. No money, no cosigns, no lies, no rides, nothing. He leaned forward, incredulous. "You're really going to watch me fail?" "I've watched you fail 100 times," I said calmly. "I just stopped catching you." Luke's face reddened. "Mom will be furious. She'll never forgive you." "She already is," I said. "I won't buy my way into being her perfect child anymore. I won't fund anyone's illusions at the cost of my life." For a moment, silence fell. His chest rose and fell, his eyes flicking to the small details of my apartment: the thrifted couch, the thrifted lamp, the small tree I'd bought myself. He realized these were the boundaries I had drawn. Invisible, but immovable. "You think I don't need this?" he asked, voice softening. "You think I'm being reckless?" "You have been reckless," I said. "For years, and I paid for it silently. I won't do it anymore. Not for money, not for appearances, not for love disguised as obligation." He laughed, bitter, sharp. "You'll regret this. Everyone will." "Maybe," I said, "but I'll regret staying in the background more." I watched him, really watched him, and saw something new: uncertainty, vulnerability. The man who had always relied on me had been stripped of my compliance, and now he was forced to face the consequences. He took a breath, a long one. "So, nothing at all?" "Nothing at all," I repeated. And in saying it, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Years of hidden labor, invisible sacrifices, and quiet resentment suddenly had a purpose. My life belongs to me now. After a long pause, he stood, hands in his pockets. He looked at the floor, then at me. I guess I'll figure it out." "Yes," I said, "you will, and so will I. We've both got lives to live, but mine isn't a credit line anymore." He left without another word. The hallway swallowed his footsteps, and the door clicked behind him. I locked it twice, finally letting the silence settle around me. It wasn't quiet like absence. It was quiet like a victory, like claiming a space I had always surrendered. Mom called 8 times that day. I let it ring. 3 voicemails, sweet at first, sharp at the end. "Honey, call me back. I'm worried." "Evan, this is serious. Your brother is drowning." I didn't respond. Dad texted once, "Call your mother." I didn't. And I realized something fundamental. Boundaries aren't dramatic. They aren't cinematic. They are steady, daily, unyielding, a quiet assertion of self. And in that moment, I finally understood that survival wasn't just about keeping the family afloat, it was about keeping myself intact. By the end of the week, the calls slowed, the texts stopped. I returned to a routine that was mine, cooking my own meals, running on my schedule, sleeping in my space. Luke's business collapsed quietly. Mom's calls became shorter, neutral, and for the first time in decades, I felt the extraordinary power of saying no and meaning it. The lesson wasn't vengeance. It wasn't cruelty. It was closure. I didn't save Luke. I didn't rescue Christmas. I didn't placate my mother's expectations. I saved myself. The days after Luke left my apartment were quieter than I expected, but not empty. The silence wasn't oppressive. It was a space I could finally breathe in. Each morning I woke and made my coffee, feeling the warmth seep into my hands, into my chest, into the very edges of my life that had been cramped for years. I started small. I made a list of routines that belonged to me. A morning run, a proper breakfast at the table, a shower that wasn't timed for someone else's schedule. I cooked meals I actually wanted to eat, rather than what could be shared or handed off. I stopped checking messages immediately, letting the world wait while I remembered what it felt like to be first in my own life. Luke's collapse happened quietly, almost like a footnote in the story I had once been forced to live. The phone never buzzed with urgent messages again. The $80,000 bridge funding never came knocking on my door, and for the first time, I didn't feel the guilty tug of responsibility. I didn't have to rescue him, his dreams, or anyone else's expectations. Mom called less, her tone softer, more neutral. "How are you?" she asked once. I answered simply, "I'm fine." That was all. No money, no excuses, no rationalizations. Just me. Dad stopped sending texts about what I should do. He had resigned, and in a way, that resignation allowed me to feel lighter. I realized that I had spent decades trying to live in a space created by others, their expectations, their judgments, their definitions of love. Now, I was allowed to define my own. I started doing things for myself without guilt. I bought a small gift in January, after rent and bills were paid, a pair of running shoes. They were good, simple, functional. I went on my first run in them and felt the air hurt my lungs in that way that reminds you you're alive. I didn't push. I didn't compare. I just moved. I also set clear boundaries with technology, with my work, with anyone who tried to pull me back into the old patterns. I deleted apps that kept me watching other lives. I turned off notifications that demanded emotional labor. My phone became a tool for me, not a leash. Work became simpler too. I stopped volunteering for every last-minute emergency. I told my boss, "I can do Tuesday," instead of "I can do whenever." He paused, surprised, then nodded. Boundaries, I realized, weren't confrontations. They were quiet acts of self-respect. Family dynamics didn't disappear, of course. Mom called from time to time, shorter now, sometimes hesitant. Luke's name came up indirectly, in passing mentions, like weather in another state. But I no longer measured my happiness or my responsibilities by their chaos. I was no longer the background. I was the lead in my own story. And in that lead role, I discovered something unexpected. Peace. It wasn't flashy or dramatic. It wasn't punctuated by crises or applause. It was quiet mornings with coffee, evening runs, dinners at the table without guilt, a life that moved at my pace. I didn't have to explain it to anyone. I didn't have to justify my choices. I just lived them. Sometimes guilt tried to creep back in, wearing Mom's voice or Luke's charm, but I had learned to recognize it. I said no, not loudly, not with anger, but firmly, like the lock on my door, like the walls of my apartment, like the steady beat of my own heart. I kept one tradition from the old family chaos, a small gift to myself each year, a reminder that I deserved care without obligation. That January, it was the running shoes. Next year, maybe a book, maybe a new coat. Something small, something mine. For the first time, I understood that life wasn't about rescuing others from their choices. It wasn't about proving love through endless sacrifice or invisible labor. Life was about tending to the self, claiming space, saying no without fear, and finally, allowing the quiet to settle in. And as I stood on this balcony that evening, looking at the city lights flickering below, I smiled. The winter air burned just a little, but it felt good. I counted my breaths. I didn't try to outrun the past. I just moved forward, slowly, deliberately, finally free. Months passed, and the rhythm of my life settled into something I could finally call my own. The chaos that had defined my family no longer dictated my days. I woke up without the heavy weight of obligation pressing down on my shoulders. Each decision, each small action, was mine to make. I thought about Luke occasionally, not with anger, not with guilt, but with clarity. I had loved him in the way I was expected to, as a sister, as the reliable one, as the invisible safety net. But that love had been conditional, chained to my silence and my compliance. Letting him go, refusing to rescue him, wasn't cruelty. It was honesty. It was the first real act of love I had given myself. Mom reached out sometimes. Her voice was softer now, stripped of the urgency and expectation that had once made my chest tighten. "How are you, Rebecca?" she'd ask. I answered simply, truthfully, "I'm fine." No explanations, no justifications, no debts owed. I allowed myself small indulgences, a warm meal I hadn't shared, a book I hadn't skimmed to finish someone else's chapter, a walk without a schedule. The apartment smelled like coffee and winter, and for the first time, it felt like home. Even Luke's collapse became a background note in the soundtrack of my life. His Instagram updates, vague as ever, didn't pierce my calm. My life no longer existed in the shadows of someone else's choices. I was the main character now, fully awake to my own story. I also noticed something I had almost forgotten: joy. It crept in quietly, like sunlight through blinds, in moments I hadn't allowed myself to notice before. A conversation with a friend without obligation, laughter that didn't require a hidden apology, a cup of tea I drank while standing in the quiet of my apartment, savoring the warmth. And then came the unexpected surprise. Love, different from the scripted and performative versions I had known. Evan, my boyfriend, had been patient, careful, giving me the space I needed. Our love wasn't about rescuing me from chaos. It was about partnership, support, and mutual respect. He didn't ask me to fix his mistakes or his past. He asked only that we face life together, side by side, not in a competition of burdens. I reflected on the lesson I had learned the hard way. Boundaries are not acts of defiance. They are acts of preservation. Saying no doesn't make you selfish. It makes you human. Protecting your peace is not betrayal. It is survival. And finally, refusing to be a background character in someone else's drama is not abandonment. It is liberation. That January, I ran twice around the park in my new shoes, feeling the air slice through my lungs and the cold press against my cheeks. I didn't run from the past. I ran alongside it, acknowledging it without letting it define me. Each breath reminded me that I had survived, that I had chosen myself, and that I was free to keep choosing this life every day. I kept one small tradition alive from the past, not because it was demanded or performed, but because it was mine. A small gift to myself each year, a quiet celebration of my autonomy. That gift, that small act, was my own declaration. I exist. I am enough. I am unshakable. And in the quiet of my apartment, with the city lights flickering below and Evan by my side, I felt a truth that had eluded me for decades. Closure isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It is quiet, steady, and absolute. It is the lock turning, the door closing, the hand released, not in anger, but in clarity. I smiled. The winter air burned softly in my lungs, and I let it. I was alive, whole, and finally free.